What is up, gang? Dana White went live earlier today with some huge news about the UFC. A lot of title fights, a lot of good fights announced. So I thought I would go live and we could talk about those, answer your questions, talk about who you like in the fights. A lot of stuff to talk about, but let's get some of the main news right out there so we can let everybody know what is going on. UFC 317 will have a fight in the main event for the vacant lightweight title. Islam Makhachev, the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, the former UFC lightweight champion at this point, he has surrendered the belt. Dana announced today that he will indeed fight Jack Della Maddalena in his next fight. Obviously, Jack just fought on Saturday. That fight, they don't have a date for it yet. My guess would be that will be in Abu Dhabi in October toward the end of the year. So that is that part of the news. So fighting for the UFC lightweight championship will be Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. That was kind of expected in recent days. The co-main event is Alexandre Pantoja. He will defend against Kai Kara France and a flyweight title fight. And the other championship fight that they announced today is one that I love, and I'm going to write a column on later, and that will be Dricus du Plessis will defend in August in Chicago at UFC 319. He will defend against Khamzat Chimaev. And you know what I'm going to write about for my column is a little bit about Chimaev was the big hot guy in 2020 during the pandemic, and he was on a fast track. He won those 3 fights so fast, and it looked like he would have the championship shot right away. And look what we're doing here. It's going to be 5 years since he debuted in the UFC before Khamzat Chimaev actually gets into a title fight. So that was the big news. There were a lot of other fights today. Another good one that came out was Robert Whittaker versus Renier de Ridder. That will be July 26th in Abu Dhabi on a fight night. That card will be on ABC, so you can watch that one for free. So let's get into any questions, and we can kind of go over some of the fights. But let me pop up your questions first. What's up, my man Holmes? How are you? And what do we got here? Do I think UFC messed up by missing Islam versus Ilia? I understand Islam wanting a second belt, but in terms of big fights, I think it was a mistake. You know, Crab, I agree with that to a large degree, you know, especially given the timing of this thing. The fact, I think that Ilia versus Islam is the second biggest fight that they can make. I think Jones versus Aspinall is the biggest fight that they have out there, and I'm expecting that fight to be in New York in November. But I think Islam versus Ilia would have been a fantastic fight, a massive event. And I agree, Crab. I think that they missed the boat. They could have had that fight and said, hey, if Islam wins, then he goes and fights Della Maddalena for the welterweight championship. Instead, you know, he vacates. Now Jack's not going to fight for several months, right? So now what does Islam do? Islam do? Islam just sits sidelined. So I think it was a mistake. You know, I kind of thought that would have been the fight to make. I thought you're talking about on the UFC's pound for pound list, number 1 versus number 3 pound for pound. Anytime you get those top people going at it, that's always a really big fight, especially in a case like this when I don't think there's much argument that Islam and Ilia are 2 of the top 3 along with John Jones in whatever order you want to put them. You know, some people like Jones won, some people like Ilia won, a lot of people like Islam number 1. But those 2 are 2 of the top 3. So I think in answer to your question, I 100% agree with that. So I appreciate that. What is up, Manu? Thank you for joining. What's up, my friend? I appreciate you joining me. JP has got a question here. Will we ever get Islam versus Ilia? I would have to say yes, but I think this one, I texted Dana White today and I said, I think Jones versus Aspinall is going to become Mayweather Pacquiao in the UFC circles. And for those of you who don't follow boxing at all, and I know that's a lot, it took over 5 years for Mayweather Pacquiao to get made. I hope it doesn't take that long for Jones versus Aspinall, but I'll say this, JP. I think that Ilya versus Islam might get on that track because, I do think that Ilya will fight at 170 one day. I really do believe that. But will his time at 170 coincide with Islam's time at that weight class? Because Islam also wants to move up to middleweight. You heard his comments in January before and after his fight, as it turned out with Manny Moicano. We thought it was going to be Arman Sarukian. But at that point, he said that he thought he could beat Dricus du Plessis and would like that opportunity. So he's the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. So, we'll see. So the thing that scares me, JP, about those two guys, and I just said how big of a fight that I think that is going to be, is that they're always going to be moving up. Ilya put a picture of himself on a scale and he was 190 recently. So, that is big for a lightweight. That was massive for a featherweight. Not so big, for a welterweight. It's not small, but it's not like this giant size welterweight. And Islam is a lot bigger than that. So I think that is a lot of the stuff going on, right? So that is a big concern of mine that I see happening. So any event there. Any chance that the Perth card gets moved to a pay-per-view? Yes. David Shaw, who is the UFC's vice president of international, he said that on Saturday night that is being talked about, that JDM, he didn't mention Islam because, Dana hadn't made his announcement today. But David said on Saturday night after Jack had won the title, Dana did not attend the press conference and David did. And he is the senior vice president for international for the UFC. So this would be something he has charge over. He said they were talking internally about making that a pay-per-view. And if they do that, then that would be for Jack because he is from Perth. So that we could see that. I would be shocked if they put that fight anywhere but in Perth. If that fight is a pay-per-view, if they make a pay-per-view in Perth, Jack Della Maddalena will be headlining it. So that will be there at that point. Why do I favor Ilya over Charles? I just think Charles makes way too many mistakes. And I think Ilya's got far better striking than Charles. And I think he is very, very good on the ground. I was going to say he's better on the ground. I think he's got better wrestling than Charles. Charles has just got those crazy submissions that he can pull up from everywhere. But I just think Charles is a guy that makes mistakes. We even saw it against Michael Chandler, right? He made the mistake against Michael Chandler in that 5th round and was getting slammed around and beaten up and everything. And that is something that, concerns me. Ilya is not a guy that makes a lot of mistakes. And Ilya has that ability to knock you out with one punch. He has an ability to submit you with any kind of move at any period of time. So that's what, to me, makes it really interesting. And I think that that's why I like Ilya in that fight. When you look at it, hey, Charles is fantastic and what he has done has just been big time. I think there's a gap when you look at, Ilya and Islam, having been at the top in the pound for pound ratings and so close in weight. There's a gap between those next guys down, right? I think, Merab Dvalishvili is number 4. I'm going to eliminate Jones in this case, but Merab is number 4. And I just don't see Merab being the skilled overall fighter that Ilya or Islam is, right? Charles isn't in that class either. Charles is like very high elite. It's kind of like those NFL draft ratings you see, right? And, if we're going to say Islam and Ilya are Hall of Famers, Charles and some of the other guys are all pros, and then a bunch of them are going to be starters. Well, I think that's what we have in the situation there. So that is. Oh, Hey, look at that. I'm on there. How about that? Somebody put a message up as me. Well, that's pretty cool. Um, thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Do I think Islam cried when he vacated? My guess is that he probably did not, because my guess is also that he made a lot of money. So I think he's probably pretty happy. What do we think about the Mexico card? Who could main event? I think Ankalaev Pereira might be the best option. I think Ankalaev Pereira may happen before that, but we shall see. I think it's a little early for September. Look, they're just announcing June 28th now, right? And so I think they got a lot of balls to juggle. So that is what is going on. So I don't. It could be then, but my guess would be probably not. Whoopsie daisy. Let's put this one up. Islam tweeted he was not vacating, but Dana had other thoughts. Who are we to believe? Well, who do you think we are to believe? Whatever Islam says, Islam controls when Islam fights. And so he's got his fight coming up against Jack Della Maddalena. Dana controls the titles. If Dana says the title is vacant, the title is vacant. And Dana very clearly, multiple times today, said the title was vacant. So whatever Islam says, that unfortunately for him, he is moving up. Dana had said before that, he didn't put a blanket on it, but he said, I don't like these dual champions. And if you move up, move up. I don't want to see guys in two divisions. He didn't totally, say no to it, but I think, he was basically saying, I'm going to stop this before it gets any, more out of hand than it is right now. So my guess is, if Islam wants to get the title back, he's going to have to fight the Oliveira Topuria winner. I think, he would have been better off, as I said in answer to Crab's question earlier, to stay. Everybody would have known Jack's not going to be fighting for a while, right? So there was nothing for him to worry about. I think he could have done the lightweight title fight, and then said, hey, I want to move up, and we would have gotten what we wanted. But anyways, that is where that one stands right there. Let's see here. Oliveira. Oh, no, Michael. Oliveira smashes Ilya. I will be very surprised if that happens. I love Charles. I think Charles is a really fun fighter, a really good guy. Great story because of what he overcame in his life. But I just do not see Charles Oliveira smashing Ilya Topuria. If you reverse that, I think it's going to be a good fight, right? I don't think it's going to be a smash either way. But if it is going to be a smash, and how I define a smash is a kick-ass, one-sided fight where one guy's winning most or all the way, I would say it's going to be Ilya Topuria doing that to Charles Oliveira, and not the other way around. That is my take. So let's see here. Does Shavkat wait or face Brady or someone else? Yeah, I think Brady and Shavkat is going to be a pretty good fight, because if you look, let me just pull up the division right now, because there's a lot of those fights that are already made. So we know that Jack is going to fight Islam in his next fight. Brady and Shavkat are 2 and 3. That makes a lot of sense. Kamaru Usman, number 5, is fighting Buckley, number 7. Gilbert Burns, number 8, is fighting Michael Morales this weekend. I would not be surprised. Stephen Thompson is number 11. If he's out of the ratings, if we've seen the last of him fighting, maybe you see a Bilal Leon rematch. Who knows what we're going to see there. I think Bilal is going to be out a while too. So I think that makes sense that Brady and Shavkat will be the ones to go. I think that's a pretty good fight there. So anyways, let's see. Islam needs to build up to welterweight. I understand that. And I would say in most cases, hey, I want to see a guy get a win in the division. Don't just move up, and get a championship shot just based on your reputation in a division lower, especially when you're going that 15-pound gap. This isn't like in boxing, where in the lower weight classes, it's 4 pounds in a lot of those classes. And then even in the bigger classes, it's 7 pounds. You're going up 15 pounds. And those are a lot bigger guys that you're fighting when you do that. And so, I think that, I would like to see, Islam or anybody making that move kind of take those fights. But that, those champions are so valuable. Islam is such a big star, not necessarily in the U.S., but around the world. He is a massive, massive star. And a lot of us in the U.S., we kind of forget that there is a whole big world out there where there are a lot of people that are watching MMA and watching other sports and other things, and we think that what happens here is all that matters. And this is the media capital and the financial capital of the world, et cetera, et cetera. But believe me when I tell you, Islam Makhachev is a massive star outside the U.S., bigger star than Ilia Topuria, no doubt about it. So, as a result of that, he has some sway and some power because of what he brings to the table. Let's go here. Let's see. Where do we go? Islam will beat JDM, inshallah. Sunshot, I think that's a good fight. I'll tell you what, I would lean toward Islam as well. But look what we saw from Jack the other day. Islam's grappling is definitely better than Jack's. There's no doubt about it. And his wrestling is going to be better. But Jack did really good against a guy like Bilal that has really good wrestling and strong grappling. And he got taken down a couple times, but he was never down for any amount of time. He defended so well that Bilal didn't even have a takedown attempt in the third round. I think that says a lot about Jack. And so, while I would agree with you that I think Islam would win that, I would disagree with the idea that, Jack has no shot or Jack's going to just get stomped. I think Jack, hey, look, he has won 18 fights in a row. You do not win 18 fights in a row in professional MMA with his, and I don't know exactly what the number is now off the top of my head, that he's won in the UFC. What is it? I think 12, if I'm not mistaken, in the UFC. But whatever the number is in the UFC, it's a high number. And you don't win that many fights in a row unless you're an elite fighter too. I think Jack showed he's an elite fighter. I like Islam to win that fight, but it's not a walkover by any stretch of the imagination. What's up, Sly Tennessee? Good to see you. DeBronx for the victory. Okay, there's another one I disagree. Sunchild, we're on the opposite side of a lot of these. Imagine Islam loses against JDM. What is he doing then? I think if he loses, he has the ability, to fight in the division, try to work his way back up. Guys come back and get title shots. If you have a chance, I want to ask you to do me a favor. I don't do this a lot, but watch my interview today with Gilbert Burns, 17 minutes. And Gilbert is such a smart guy. And the reason I bring it up in answer to what you said, Crazy Ari, is this. Gilbert has lost 3 fights in a row. He is 3-5 in his last 8. And he is explaining in that interview why he still thinks he has a chance at a championship down the road. And you have to listen to what he says. But Gilbert has lost 3 in a row and 5 of his last 8, and he believes that way. So let's just say if Islam loses 1 fight to JDM, even if he gets knocked out, I don't think it's the end of the world. Yeah, it's a setback for him, no doubt. He could still probably go back and fight at lightweight if he wanted. And if he went back, he would fight for the title right away. And then that would give us the fight that we were talking about earlier that we wanted to see. But, I think the more likely scenario would be he stays in the division and he keeps fighting right there. And to me, that would be that would just be what he would do, right? So I appreciate that. JDM versus Islam is not a foregone conclusion. In terms of, and I appreciate the tip very much, Sly Tendencies. Are you saying it's not a foregone conclusion in terms of the fight being made or in terms of who wins? If you're saying who wins, I agree with you. If you're saying in terms of the fight being made, Dana announced today that the fight is happening. So I'm not sure exactly what you are saying right there. So let's see, what else do we have here? Charles is a huge lightweight. Ilya is pretty small. See, no, I disagree with you, my friend. Ilya weighed 190. That is not a small lightweight. That is not a small lightweight at all. So I disagree there. Let's see. Do Imavov and Kaio co-main at 319? That is a fight that I believe is agreed to, if not done. Right? I don't. So there's a big difference. A lot of times, a done fight is a fight where fighters have both signed their contract, where they have agreed to terms or their managers have agreed to terms. We've seen all this crazy stuff, right? Remember a while ago when Dustin Poirier was saying, no, that I didn't sign this fight, blah, 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 blah. And, Dana got all mad and pulled him off. And then everything came back. That's kind of when there's a lack of communication sometimes. And that's why the UFC has become so careful recently about, they're not announcing anything until it's actually signed on paper. That fight, Imavov and Caio Borralho, that fight, I believe, will happen unless something comes up. But that is the fight that both guys have agreed to, but not a signed fight there. Is Buckley going to hurt Usman? Interesting question. I have been a really, really, really big Buckley fan, on his rise here. And I loved his fight against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I thought he was fantastic against Colby Covington. He's fighting off and he's improving, doing a lot of really good things. And so he has the momentum, if you want to call it that Usman does not have. But Usman has that wrestling ability and he's been there. I would favor Buckley, at least off the top of my head at this point, without having really broken it down and spent time thinking about it. Just kind of off the top of my head, I would lean to Buckley. But that's another one of those fights where I say, the old guy, he might be able to pull that off. Usman wants to fight for one more title. He can't afford losses. So, he's going to have a lot of motivation in that fight. I like that fight a lot. I think that gives both guys, big incentive. So that is a fun fight. Let's see. Dricus will find a way to win. I am sure of it. Dricus is an impressive fighter. I have always liked Hamzat. I thought that wrestling he had was overwhelming. He's not the fastest handed guy, but he hits like a truck. But you wonder, Dricus has that funny style and everything. It's going to cause some trouble. I think that's a really good fight to watch, and I'm not sure. I want to think about that one. I'm going to write a column later tonight on Hamzat about his journey and everything. I love Hamzat's story, and I love the fact that, he looked like the guy that everybody thought was going to, rocket ship to the title. And now here we are 5 years later when he finally gets his championship shot. And I think it's really fascinating. And I think that's a fight that a lot of people are going to have a lot of interest in when it comes from. What source or sources did I draw from to say Islam is a massive star? People at the UFC. So, I heard that from them. They tell me that. I also see on my traffic, right? On my Instagram, I can see and you see where the people are coming from. But Islam is a big star. I know a lot of times I want to caution you guys about a couple things. There are purses that are put out. And one of the things that pisses me off anymore is that most of the athletic commissions don't release the purses of the fighters. Now, the purses, and it's more true in boxing than it is of MMA, aren't always representative of actually what the fighters are getting, but it gives you at least a pretty good idea, right? And now the promoters in both boxing and MMA have gone to the commissions and said, let's make it private, and that should be public information. So in a lot of those states where they don't release, you will see reporters putting out, hey, and I put reporters, quote unquote, they're putting out, this is what the purses are. And they have no idea, and that's all guess, and it's all frankly bullshit. And I also see pay-per-view numbers on Wikipedia, And most of those numbers on MMA are total BS. And there's very few people, especially now under ESPN, that know this. Back in the day when it was done through cable and satellite, and there was a lot of different entities. A lot of people knew what the numbers were, and there were formulas that you could figure out that worked almost every time that would give you really close approximations of what the numbers are. That is not true now. So don't, Simon and everybody else who is believing some of that stuff, just look at a lot of that stuff with caution. California, as an example, releases the purses. So if you see the purse in California, that's the minimum that the fighter got paid. He may get more, or she may get more, because they can pay them more than they're contracted for. They can't pay them less than they're contracted for. And so sometimes they have deals that they make a little bit more money. So just, I want to throw a little bit of caution to the wind there. So in that, do I think Arman is going to end up fighting the winner of Gamrot Klein? I think the Gamrot fight would be a good fight for him. That was a fun fight the last time, assuming Gamrot wins. Of course, Klein could win that fight too, Ludovic, but I am not sure what the hell is going on with Arman, and he fought in karate combat, and I am certainly not, I am not sure what is going on there. Is the UFC becoming like boxing with the belts? I don't think so. How do you think that is? Like, they have an interim title at heavyweight. I'm trying to think there is no other interim, right? I'm looking, no, guys are leaving divisions and they're moving up, but that, Tom Aspinall is the only interim champion. And so no, that they're not doing that like boxing. Boxing makes those, they have 4 different organizations. A lot of times we have 4 different champions. They strip guys. I wrote a column today on Manny Pacquiao. I love Manny Pacquiao. I freaking love him. What a good guy he is. And, it's been good to me over the years and everything, but he doesn't deserve a title shot. It's bullshit. And, he's fighting for the championship. And that's the kind of thing that happens in boxing. And, I know a lot of people want to rip the UFC sometimes for fights that get made that they didn't like. But when you look at the UFC, they rarely have a title fight where you can't make a good argument that, hey, this guy should be in. Now, I think the last time that I can think of where there was that big uproar was when Pereira fought Khalil Rountree, right? Now, Khalil Rountree, I think, proved in that fight at UFC 307 against Alex Pereira that the UFC was right, that he deserved it because he put on a hell of a fight. He didn't win it, but he put on a hell of an entertaining fight that, people who saw it really enjoyed. But, going in, he was ranked 8th. There were guys ahead of him. Ankalaev was ahead of him. And that could have been the fight that they made, and they chose not to make that at that time. But UFC rarely does that. So I don't think that, that's an issue that the UFC has. Hey, Steve, how are you, my friend? Thank you for jumping in. I appreciate it. What do we got here? I think Khamzat is a bigger star. I'm not arguing that. Islam feels like Khabib's protege, similar to how Tommy Gunn was in the shadow of Rocky and Rocky 5. I am not going to argue whether I think Khamzat is a star too. Islam, though, is a champion. And I just know, Islam is really big. And I'm telling you that from people inside the UFC at the highest levels, and from just my numbers that I see on my social media, when you tweet about somebody. So we will see, where that goes. Anyways, let's see, what do we have here? Let's see. I'm trying to. Man, I got a lot of these here. If Buckley beats Usman in great fashion, is he getting a title shot next? He is not going to get the title shot next because that is going to go to Islam Makhachev. If you're going to say after, that is a possibility. It depends on when they make Shavkat versus Brady. That would be the thing that I think would be there. Let's see. Arman versus Patty for number 1. Ariel! Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I don't have a problem with that, right? I think Patty Pimblett, what he did in his last fight, holy shit, right? Doing that to Chandler. I had said I liked Pimblett before that fight, and that was a really good one. So, I was impressed with the performance that he put on. So I don't have an argument there if they do that. Uh, anyways, my camera angle makes me a talking head. Okay. Well, the problem is my chair is broken. So let's stand up here. I have my chair, then I have this cushion, then I have this cushion, and I have another cushion, but that third cushion that I sit on, it's hard. It is hard when I put that third cushion down that I'm sliding off it all the time. So I go a little lower on the screen. You know what? I always say you can't make chicken salad out of what. So it is what it is, right? I'm not going to win the beauty contest, so I don't make any pretenses. Let's see. I'm saying Islam walking over JDM is not a foregone conclusion. Oh yeah, no, I agree 100%. I agree. I agree with that. He called the Bilal JDM fight to a T, made a lot of people a lot of money. He said JDM will turn it on late. Yeah, I mean, JDM was a good dog in that fight. And boy, he put on a performance, I thought. MMA fans talk about height, more about height than some females. Shit is getting ridiculous. At what point do we talk about actual skills going into consideration instead of all that he's small, he big crap? I understand what you're saying, Cyber Moose. I think sometimes, size, when you're at an elite level, a good big man beats a good little man, right? All of us on here, I'm a big guy, right? I'm not beating any of these guys, despite my size, but there's guys that are smaller that, going up against somebody that, is a big, strong guy that's quick, that's athletic. So I understand your point, and I agree to it to a large, to somewhat of a degree. But like, if Ilya today, I think he's perfectly fine going to lightweight. But if Ilya said, hey, I weigh 190, I want to go straight up to welterweight, I think that's a different story. Ilya now is losing. Number one, you're going to think he's carrying more weight. He's going to lose some of the explosiveness that makes him so good as a striker, right? What is so good about Ilya? Ilya, is fast and he's powerful and he hits and plus he has such all that good stuff that he does, on the ground. If he's bigger, it's not going to be as easy to take the other guys down. He's going to lose some of his own explosiveness. So I think, while I understand your point, I think, as Floyd Mayweather always said, skills pay the bills. And I saw somebody on the UFC broadcast was stealing Mayweather's old line the other day. I do believe that. I do believe size is a factor in some of the fights. Let's see. If Gamrot beats Klein and Arman is he next for the belt? I don't think Gamrot is going to be next, even with wins like that. I just don't see that, being the case, right? So Gamrot being at number 7, Gaethje has a chance to fight for the title. Holloway is up there. If he beats Dustin Poirier, I just think even with those 2 wins, I would not think so. That would be my guess. I would not think so. Poirier is the GOAT. Dustin Poirier is indeed a GOAT. There is no question about that. There's no doubt that Dustin is a GOAT. Ilya would be grossly obese at 190 due to his height. Well, I just saw the picture. I don't know. Maybe he manipulated a scale, but I don't think he would be grossly obese at 190, but that's just me. And I'm just saying what I saw. What is his height? I don't even know off the top of my head what his height is, but let's look him up. Where is he here? Ilya's. I love the fact that Ilya went from being the featherweight champion to now, and the latest UFC rankings, he's ranked number 3 in the featherweight division. What is going on with some of these rankings? It is so nutty. Like, I don't share Dana's total disdain for the rankings. I think sometimes you got to look at him a little differently, but oh my God, how do you have the guy number 3? I think that's a problem with the way they set the rankings up. If he moved up, he shouldn't be listed in featherweight anymore, but I'm not finding off the top of my head. I think he's 5'7", right? So I don't know that that is accurate. What do you think of people saying that Dana's happy Bilal lost? I like Bilal. I don't think Dana's happy that Bilal lost. Bilal is willing to fight anybody. He hasn't been the most boring fight, the most exciting fighter. People called him boring. He hasn't been the most exciting fighter out there, but he's been successful and he's beating a lot of good guys. And, Dana told me this, and I know it got out there, but I interviewed Dana and I wrote this in my story. They on his Instagram, they take video of when he does wraps the belt around the champion's waist. And at the time that UFC 304 happened, the belt wrap with Bilal was the most watched belt wrap, on Dana's Instagram. And, I don't know the exact period of time, but it was a long time, right? And that indicates that Bilal has a fan base, not that, he's the biggest star there is, but it indicates that he has a fan base, right? So that is something that I think, just keep that in the back of your mind there. I don't think that that's true. Dana's one, like, hey, the best are going to fight the best and we'll see who wins. And so in boxing, like, the promoters are always rooting for their guy. And I remember when it was De La Hoya versus Trinidad and it was 2 unbeaten welterweight champions. And that became such a huge fight. I covered that fight back in the day. It's hard to believe it's going to be 26 years in September since that fight happened. But I was all over that fight. I was with Tito Trinidad. My late colleague at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Royce Fuhr, covered Oscar for that fight. I covered Trinidad, and I wrote about him every day for the last 3 weeks. Even though he didn't speak English and his father wasn't letting him talk to the media, I still managed to write about him every single day. So there was a lot of hype around that. But Don King had Trinidad. He badly wanted Trinidad to win. Arum had De La Hoya. He badly wanted De La Hoya to win. But, and Dana White's not like that. He figures, what, whoever wins, if you beat a big star, you become a star yourself. And the way the UFC promotes that, it doesn't work every single time, but that works a lot, and it works to their benefit. So that is how I would answer that question. Will John submit Aspinall or win by TKO in your humble opinion? I like Jones, but I think this is a bad matchup for him. And I think Aspinall matches up well with Jones. I think Jones will win the fight, but I just want to say now, if Tom Aspinall becomes new, don't be shocked, right? Aspinall is really good in the areas that Jones is really good in, and he hits very, very hard. I will pick Jones to win that fight when that fight comes, because Jones is a genius in the ring, and his body, he's got those long legs, and he can do things that not a lot of other fighters can do. But having said that, I like, I think Aspinall matches up really well with him. So, keep your eye on that. Jones versus Aspinall ain't happening until November. September is in Mexico, October in Abu Dhabi. I already said that earlier. So we agree on that. Usman is getting his last win. So you like him to beat Buckley, huh? Okay, that's interesting. My background looks like it's being held by hostage. But what is wrong with my background? I paid a lot of money for this thing. What's wrong with my background? Before I have all my bobbleheads and my books. I got some books in my other room over there too. I read a lot. If you can't figure, I got Kindles. I got 100 books on my Kindle. I got audiobooks that I listen to in my car. But I have 5 bookcases here and 3 bookcases in there, and they're all filled up with books. And people are peeping on the books I'm reading. So I said, screw it. I'm going to put my logo up and people know where to find my stories. So I don't think there's anything wrong with my background. I like it. So there. Usman is plus 180 versus Buckley, and Hamzat is minus 245 versus DDP. I hadn't seen the numbers yet, and Anthony adds that is via FanDuel. Let me see if DraftKings has that up right now. Let me check that out, and I'll be curious to see, especially on that Hamzat fight, how they have that. Let's see here. Where is MMA? If they even have it up yet. So let's see. We got that up now. And all right. So in some of these fights, they have Merab minus 340 over O'Malley, Holloway minus 105, Poirier minus 115. DraftKings has it minus 225 for Hamzat and plus 185 for Duplessis. They for what it's worth. So JP, you were bringing up Jones before. They have it minus 130 Aspinall, plus 110 Jones. So interesting there. They do not have a number yet on Usman versus Buckley, unless I'm overlooking it. I don't see that. So they don't have that up there yet. Interesting. Islam is a massive star. This guy can't walk anywhere without getting mobbed. Yep, we don't need to get back into that, too, but I agree with that. Is UFC not doing double champs anymore? Why is Jones still the champ and Islam gets vacated? Jones is a heavyweight champion, and he just defended the title in November, so it's not that long since he defended it, right? So I don't think there's any issue with Jones. But he's not the light heavyweight champ. Magomed Ankalaev is the light heavyweight champion. But the UFC, Dana does not like that because it's hard to get guys to defend both. Amanda Nunes did a great job of being able to defend both of those belts. And if you get somebody like Amanda, when she had the featherweight belt and the bantamweight belt, then you can do it. But not a lot of them do, and you go a long time with one of those titles not getting defended, and that's really where Dana's problem is. Let's see. Do you think Weili will drop her belt to fight Shevchenko? I will say this. I think probably more than likely she will drop the belt. She will be forced to pick, do I want to fight at 125 or do I want to stay the champion at 115, but I think she's going to want to fight Shevchenko, give up the title. No, here's what I wish the UFC would do. One thing that I think boxing does that's good that I wish the UFC would do. A lot of times what they do is they'll say, okay, you can go up and fight. So let's take this specific case that Cameron asked about. Weili, you can move up from 115 to 125 and you fight Valentina. If you win, you have X period of time to decide which belt you want to keep, and you have to surrender one other ones. So maybe as an example, Weili might say, hey, I want to go up and I want to defeat Valentina because I want to show I'm the best fighter in the world among women. So she moves up to 125, but she says, it's that way. I make 115 comfortably. There's some big women at 125 and they're coming down from bantamweight. It puts me at a disadvantage. So I want to stay at strawweight, but I want to take my shot to win the flyweight championship. I wish they would do that. That's what they do in boxing a lot of the times. And that's one thing that I think boxing gets right. And so, I think that is why that's something I would do. Let's see. Arman seriously screwed up. In my opinion, he deserved to fight for the title more than Oliveira, but he pissed the UFC off so much that they're putting him on the shelf. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know that something had to have happened. And I have asked so many people and I've never gotten a response. But this is just me and what I am thinking, right? I don't know anything on this, but it's my sense. I think the UFC doctors cleared Arman to fight. His back was hurting him. I don't think there's anybody that doubts that his back was hurting. I think they cleared him to fight, and said, you can go, it's up to you on pain tolerance. And I think at that point, Arman made the decision not to fight. And I think that pissed Dana off. And I think ergo, you see what is happening to him. I agree 100% with what Cyber Moose said. I don't have any evidence of that, but he did something that really, really pissed him off. That's what I think it might be, but who knows, where we are. So they made Islam vacate because of Topuria. They don't want to have darts. They do not want to have double champions. That's what we're just talking about. So that's why he did that. People arguing that Islam isn't a star. Go look at the numbers, the followers, the interview views. It's not that hard. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I think, you just look at it and, but I think what happens is, people in the United States, a lot of times they don't, he's Russian. He doesn't live here. He's not in the media, like a lot of people, so like, you look at Islam and, he doesn't speak the language. So a lot of the shows in the United States, Ariel was on before, hard to get him to go on a lot of those shows. Right. And, his English is a lot better than it used to be, but it's just one of those things, right? English is not his first language. So he gets ignored to a degree in the United States that he wouldn't if English was his first language. And that is what I think, my problem, what's going on there, but he is massive in the rest of the world. And I think that, so we shall see. Do I think this means Usman Nurmagomedov to the UFC is getting closer? I don't know. To be honest with you, I have never looked into what his contract status is. I'll make a phone call this week and see what his contract status is. I think that, excuse me on that. I think, Usman is a really, really good fighter. And he would add a lot of depth to the UFC's lightweight division. And I think he would probably like to be in there. But I'm not sure what his contract status is, right? So that is kind of doing it. This is weird. It makes no sense for people to be vacating their belts. Neither Ilya nor Islam had a very good reason to vacate. Very anticlimactic to vacate belts. I'm not sure why you would say that. They're not holding up divisions, right? So look at happened at featherweight. So Volkanovski and Diego Lopez fought for the title. Volkanovski won a really fun, entertaining fight, became the featherweight champion. Now Ilya is getting his shot to fight. 6 weeks, 2 months later, whatever it is. He's getting his chance to fight for another belt. And later this year, Islam is moving up and he's going to fight Jack for the belt. So, unless you're really into the champion versus champion thing, like I think look at it pound for pound, more, and see where those numbers are. And when you're getting, those, that doesn't matter weight class, right? So, Islam is number one in what is JDM in the UFC's most recent rankings. I think he is what is he now? JDM is number 9. So, you have two top, 10, top 9 guys fighting. I don't know where the, anticlimactic part of that comes in, right? And if they fight in 2 divisions, like I said a little bit ago, you see guys give up the belts and, there's special athletes that can do that. But even Conor McGregor couldn't do it, right? He won the belts, but then he couldn't defend them. He never defended the featherweight title. That is a big problem. Do we want to tie up a lot of the belts? And then, they have more shows than ever. You need title fights. People complain about the main events if there's not a title fight. So I think they're doing okay with how they're doing it right now. Islam beats JDM, then goes back down and beats Ilya. He could try that, but I think they would force him to give up the welterweight belt then. So, it'll be interesting. They will make an exception in rare cases. So, Mr. Dialed In, if they do that, what you say, let's take that. So Islam is the clear number 1 guy in the lightweight division. He moves up. If he beats Jack and becomes the welterweight champion and says, I want to go down and fight for the lightweight title again, they may give him that shot at that point, but they're not going to do that to a lot of guys for the reason I said before. Let's see. Usman will be in the UFC by 2027. He signed a 2-year contract with PFL at the end of the year. I mean, I'm not sure if that's right or not, but if that's accurate, there's your answer for the person who was asking before. When a vacated belt is one, that means you just won the belt but didn't really beat the best person to get that belt. No, you're beating the best person who was available in the division, right? So if a guy cannot make the weight anymore, and that's what Ilya said. Ilya said, I cannot make the weight anymore. And, you know, he was saying how big he is. He's not qualified to fight in that division, right? And so now I understand where you're saying, but he won the vacant title because Volkanovski beat the best available guy that was there. And you see, unlike in boxing, you know, you see the UFC guys fight the elite opponents all the time, right? So I think that's something that, you have to consider too, right? All right, let's go back here. Ilya is Saruki in size. So let's see. Holy shit, I didn't know Ilya was 190. What's up, King? Anyone that says Islam is ducking is either a casual or just a pure hater, because Islam is doing the same thing Ilya did, and he's going up against someone in Jack Della Maddalena, which is a harder fight. So you're saying Della Maddalena is a harder fight for Islam than Charles is for Ilya? Okay, I wouldn't argue that. I mean, if that is your take, you know, I think it's close, right? But Della Maddalena looked really, really good, and as I said earlier in this chat, I think he's a really good matchup for Ilya. So, you know, while I will like Ilya to win that fight, that's no slam dunk. Do you think this will be Chimaev's only fight in the United States? Feeling I might have to head to Chicago in case. I think if Chimaev wins, it will not be his only fight in the United States. I don't think so. That's just in my case. No co-main event yet for that show. Max versus Dustin. Boy, Dustin has beaten him twice. I thought UFC was at 136 in Atlanta. I thought that that was a really close fight. I don't remember who I had. I thought I might have had Max at the end of that, but it was really close. But I would kind of lean toward Max, but I'll tell you, it's going to be a lot of momentum on Dustin's side, his final fight. It's going to be a fun one. I really look forward to seeing that one. It would be badass if Islam wins the welterweight title and Ilya beats Oliveira, that goes up for the welterweight 3-division champ title and fights Islam. I would love that. That's the kind of. I wrote a column. When was it? Last year, and I realized it kind of got outdated by events and everything. But I had talked about when Alex Pereira won the light heavyweight title. And I talked about, hey, he's won the middleweight title. He's won the light heavyweight title. Give him the shot to fight, for the heavyweight belt. Now, I don't think he would have won it, but it would have been interesting to see a guy go for history like that. It's never been done before. And where do they do that? I think the best place for a fighter to do that, and it's going to be men, because maybe you can do it on a woman where but I think for men it is going to be a guy going from flyweight to bantamweight and then potentially to featherweight. Now that is a big jump, for a guy going from 125 to 145, but I think you're not going with those big massive leaps, right? But if you're, like when you're looking at, take it from Islam's standpoint, if he wants to be a 3-division champion and he said he thinks he can beat Dricus, think about what he would have to do. He's going from 155 to 170, a 15-pound leap. Then he would go from 170, if he won that belt, to 185. That is massive, and that's really, really hard to do. Whereas at least if you're going from 125 to 145, percentage of body weight, I get it's big, and that's going to be a factor, where the guys are coming down from. and I don't think it's going to be done every day, but I think that will be your best bet. Get a guy that can put, like Manny Pacquiao was able in boxing. He started at 108 when he was 16 years old, and then just moved up, right, and became a 154 pounder. He was really a welterweight, but he did fight at 154 as well. So I think that it's going to take somebody that has that rare body that can go up and add weight, but not a lot of them. So anyways, what do we got here? Any idea on these three, Arman, Patty, and Gaethje? I would not be surprised if Gaethje holds off just announcing a fight till he sees what happens between Ilya and Charles. Gaethje has already fought Charles, and I think that if Ilya wins that, Gaethje's going to want that shot. So that would be with Gaethje. And who are the other? You said Arman. Arman, man, I just can't figure out Arman. So I am not sure about that one. And then Patty. I think Patty that they are going to have to give him a really big fight. Ariel was on here earlier, and he mentioned, Patty fighting Sarukian. I'd like to see Sarukian get a fight because he's been winning and doing well. Patty would be a good fight there. When Dan Hooker is healthy, is Dan Hooker an opponent that would make sense? I think so. So there's some guys in those divisions that I think would make sense for him. Let's see. What does Ilya versus Charles? Why does Ilya versus Charles need to be for the vacant belt? Neither guy is a number one contender. Ilya had one title defense with no ranked lightweight wins. Because I think Ilya is number 3 pound for pound, right? And going back to what I said before, and who do you give the championship to? Like I had said before, Darts, like think about what I had talked about before. If my speculation on Arman is right, and I admit it is just speculation, but if my speculation on why Arman is right, that the doctor cleared him and then he didn't get the fight, he didn't take the fight anyways, the UFC is mad and they feel like he screwed up their pay-per-view at the last minute. They may not be into giving him a title shot. So now if he's not in, but look what's happening at welterweight, right? So right away, the rankings now are Bilal 1, Sean Brady 2, Shavkat 3, Leon 4. Shavkat was in line for the championship, so you would have thought he would have been next, but now he got bypassed. So did Sean Brady, so did Bilal for the next welterweight title shot for Islam. That is kind of what happened. So I'm not sure where the angst is coming from with a lot of you guys on that. Let's see here. Where are we? Gamrot would easily beat Gaethje. Gaethje's takedown defense is very overhyped. Okay, we will see. Because Batty Dana said so. Yes. Did you mean Batty Dana or Daddy Dana? With Moicano versus Dariush rebook, which makes no sense. Who should be next for Hoofy? Yeah, I mean Hoofy, we got to get him a really good fight. Maybe. What about I'm trying to blank on the name. The big tall kid from Spain, who is a good striker. Joel Alvarez, who was supposed to fight on this card. That might be somebody that get there. So let's see. This doesn't make any sense that it should have been Arman versus Topuria. Why should Topuria fight a guy who lost to the number one contender, leaving so many what ifs? I think, Ryan, you've heard the answer to that. We've been talking about that here for a while. I just think it's, they're down on. I'm not saying I agree with it, right? I think Arman, if you get hurt, let's just even say, let's say this. Let's take the scenario that I laid out earlier, and anybody who's on here knew and didn't hear. I said, I speculate that in the middle of the night when Arman was cutting weight and hurt his back, that the doctor looked at him and cleared him and said he was okay to fight, and that Arman decided not to fight anyways. Now, that's why I think the UFC is pissed at him. if that is accurate, let's assume for this argument that that's accurate. If that is accurate, do you not understand why Arman did that? You're going up against the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. You want this, you're going to get one shot at it. You want to be at your best. And if you injured your back at the weight cut and you have no idea, is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? And you make a decision where you believe is in your best interest, so should you get penalized for that? So that, I think that's something, but the UFC, for whatever reason, they are not showing they're interested in being in the Arman Tsarukyan business, at least for not now. And I don't know this. Again, this is just speculation, but think of what happened with Muhammad Mokaev, right? Hunter Campbell just got sick of dealing with all this stuff that came up with Muhammad Mokaev. Is there a possibility that Arman Tsarukyan is that same thing? So that is something that we're going to get. Let's see. Soccer kicks are legal in 6 states. Why doesn't the UFC have them? Because they're not legal in the unified rules. And so the UFC uses the unified rules. If they were legal in the unified rules, they would use them. All right. I am running out of voice here. So let me see if I can get a question that's totally different. Do I believe Islam is the greatest lightweight of all time? Let me pull up. I'm going to pull up Tapology here, and I'm going to look at, just so I know who he beat. I think my inclination would be to say yes, but I want to look at who he defeated so I know, and I'm not forgetting anybody. So let's see here. All right. So he beats Volkanovski twice. He beats Dustin Poirier, Oliveira, Dan Hooker, Dober. He, beats Tsarukyan in 2020. So BJ Penn would come to mind. I'm trying to think who else would pop to mind that that should be in that in that spot. But I think Islam has a pretty good argument for it. So let's see, what do we got here? There's only 2 fighters from PFL that can say they're best in their divisions: Dakota Ditcheva and Shamil Musayev. How do they say that? Who did Dakota beat that would make you say she's better than Valentina? So, any event, I am going to wrap this, guys, because I'm losing my voice. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the engagement and all the questions. I appreciate you guys greatly. Do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to my channel. Do me a favor and show some love to KevinIole.com. You can see it right back there, KevinIole.com. I would appreciate it. Keep an eye out. I'm going to do a column on Khamzat Chimaev later today. Enjoy the fights, everybody. I appreciate y'all. Have a great one. See you soon.